5 major media outlets, including the New York Times and The Guardian, are calling for the charges against Wikileaks founder Julian Assange to be dropped. In a letter to the U.S. government, the media organizations call the indictment a dangerous precedent that threatens to undermine America's First Amendment and the freedom of the press. They go on to say that publishing is not a crime, something we've said on the show multiple times, and obtaining and disclosing sensitive information when necessary is in the public interest. That's a core part of the daily work of journalists. Criminalizing this work makes democracy significantly weaker.
Julian Assange was arrested in 2019 under the Espionage Act following the publication of classified material that detailed corruption, diplomatic scandals, and spying on an international scale. Friend of the show, Glenn Greenwald, responded to the push for the charges against Assange to be dropped, tweeting, quote, "Good to see the media outlets who profited from his scoops finally defending him." Robby, why do you think it took so long? I mean, this is unequivocally good news. I shouldn't immediately poop on it. No. But I mean, there is this question, like, what is with this timing?
Yeah, I don't know, but better late than never, I guess. They are absolutely right to say what we've been saying for years on this show. The previous hosts were saying it before we were. It is not a crime to reveal to the information, to reveal to the public information you got that is in the public interest about the lies the government told that contradicts what they said. That is not a crime. That is journalism. That is what the New York Times does. That is what the Washington Post does on a good day. It's what all journalists should aspire to do. And Julian Assange is not a criminal. He is a hero, and he has suffered a horrible cost for what he did. He has been, he was trapped in that embassy for years under not thrilling conditions, and is now actually being held in prison in Britain under terrible conditions. It's horribly impacted his health. He's in bad state. Yeah, we've talked to his brother on the show before. It's awful. And the U.S. government could easily put an end to this. They could just stop this indictment, or they could issue a blanket pardon or commutation or whatever. Any of those things would be fine. But they should stop trying to imprison him. They should let him be a free man, and they should thank him for the public service he performed.
Yeah, I mean, Glenn has been making this point really consistently about the New York Times and these other papers profiting off of benefiting from these kinds of stories. And, part of the tension that's always existed is this kind of New York Times rule where there are so many publications that could be implicated by Assange going down under the Espionage Act. And it is curious. I wonder whether or not some of the conversations we've been having in a foreign policy context about authoritarianism overseas has continued to heighten the contradictions as America wants to demonstrate that it's much more free than other countries like Russia and China, is the fact of how it's treated Julian Assange kind of an inconvenient truth that it's having to contend with more and more.
The Obama administration said it wanted to be the most transparent administration in history, and then prosecuted a record number of whistleblowers. So you can't just talk the talk, you have to walk the walk. I think there's a certain, in terms of the media, I think there's a certain amount of, maybe this is vibes only, I don't know, but contempt for a Julian Assange type figure who is an independent figure who was not operating or working for an establishment media property, was doing his own thing. There's a certain amount of protecting the prestige of an institution like the Times and the Post, et cetera. So when they do it, it's okay. It's good. Not only is it okay, it's good. It should be celebrated. When someone outside the bubble does it, it's like, well, it's that's
and I also
provocative.
Think
that's contrarian. That's weird. I don't know.
For sure. And as much as we talk about, and I think especially conservatives talk about cancel culture, it's worth noting that some of the allegations, I think that part of what allowed so many people to walk away from Assange, including journalists who sort of know better, was this idea that he's a bad guy anyway. And some of the Me Too allegations that had surfaced and that were ultimately discredited stuck in people's minds, such that I remember there was an interview done with AOC in the beginning, I think January of 2021 at The Intercept, where she was asked about her support of Julian Assange. The Intercept is obviously an outlet that has been really all on these issues for a long time, founded by Glenn Greenwald. And her answer kind of dodged and alluded to the fact that, I don't know that much about him, but it seems like he's unsavory, like basically alluding to those kinds of allegations. And I think a lot of people fell into that trap. It's not saying that they were bad people for having fallen into the trap, but you really do hope at least our Congress members, our leftist Congress members in particular, keep an eye on the ball a little more closely.
That has happened so many times now that people tainted with Me Too stuff, which can run all the way from very serious accusations to you made someone feel uncomfortable once in a social situation, and then it could be a million years, it could have been yesterday, it could have been a million years ago. There could be plenty of verification, there could be no verification whatsoever. The person, but it's just the whiff of it.
Yeah, especially for the left.
Can doom you. It's crazy.
Because the left cares. Like the left actually does want to protect the interests of women. They do want to do the right thing. So when an Alex Moore situation comes along, that was the gay candidate in Massachusetts who had an accusation that went absolutely nowhere, but it ruined his his congressional campaign. You saw this happen with Shahid Buttar, who was one of the only people to ever challenge Nancy Pelosi in her district. It's reported to be a Pelosi-backed campaign to elevate the accusations against him, which were not they were the kind of interpersonal types of accusations, nowhere near like the kind of Weinstein type accusations. And I think it ends up hurting the left more because they immediately bend the knee. Scott Stringer in the New York mayoral race had to drop out and was abandoned by AOC and the other leftist.
I was just reading about, so I just found him again, I couldn't recall his name, the author Junot Diaz, who was canceled. It was a Pulitzer Prize, where he was part of the Pulitzer Prize board, and he was canceled for a Me Too accusation, and he lost all these kind of professional gigs, so it was investigated by the Pulitzer Committee. And they found, they hired a firm to invest like you would do if it was a workplace thing. And they found there was no validity whatsoever to the accusations. Yeah. The accusation was like that he kissed someone on a cheek in like a social situation. It absolutely collapsed. That's crazy stuff.
Yeah, I think it also had a lot to do with people decided that the content of his stories were misogynistic. And I remember at the time there was this argument about whether or not it was so autobiographical that he was basically telling on himself, or whether or not you should just read the book as fiction and separate it apart from him. And shit, is it right to attribute all of those personality traits to him? Yeah, we're still working through, I think, as a society, how we want to treat these things. I've
never ascribed to George R. Martin a desire to burn people to death with dragon fire, but.
Although maybe we should interview him and find out.
That would be great. So we've come a long way from the subject of the discussion now.
Julian Assange.
I think this is a topic that interests us both. Yeah. A little bit of the overboard Me Too stuff, but anyway, that really did. I think that did have an effect on the coverage from mainstream institutions, and then also the fact that undeniable that he was so vocally against Hillary Clinton and would not kind of fall in line to a we have to stop saying things that could be embarrassing to Democrats because we can't get Trump.
100%.
And he did not take that view, and that put him 100% at odds with where the mainstream media was headed.
Yeah, relatable from my perspective. But good news all around for people who love freedom of the press, and we will have more Rising for you after this.